Hey everyone, Chris Sawyer here. The Varietal Show is back. I am right here in Healdsburg, California. Anyone been to Dry Creek or Healdsburg? You know it's pretty awesome here. This is my great friend Nick Goldschmidt, and this is Goldschmidt Vineyards, and I'm actually at Goldschmidt Vineyards. To be really honest, I have known this man for almost 3 decades, and I've never even been here, and it's the craziest thing. And we just judged a great competition together, the North Coast Wine Challenge, and the most important thing about me being here with Nick is not just that I'm here and that we know each other and everything. He's never here. That's the thing. This man makes wine around the world. So when you get a chance, he always bugs me, Chris, when am I going to be on the show? And I always call him. I'm like, oh, dude, be on the show. And it never works out because he's in Chile or back in New Zealand where he's from, or somewhere on the planet, but not here. So you guys get to see Nick in his own home, and actually right behind us is a wonderful picture of his family and a little party palace that they designed during the pandemic. Smart idea, disco balls, everything. It's a tennis court out there, a little rugby playing field over there, and a lot of vineyards here. Nick, it's great to be here. Thanks you for
Chris.
having me.
Thanks for coming.
Absolutely. I did mention New Zealand. I've known you for almost 30 years, 3 decades, because you were making wine a long time ago when I got in this business for Simi wines. Anyone out there have had Simi wines, you know that the pedigree of the winemakers there is very special. It's a very, very special winery for the types of winemakers that come out there. David Ramey, and as we're going to find out here, Zalma Long was a very big deal, and there were a lot of women winemakers there. And then you come along. So what brought you here to America and California in particular?
Well, I was actually in Chile back in, I was finishing the vintage in Chile in 1990. Now, remember the Southern Hemisphere's vintages are 6 months ahead of the Northern Hemisphere. Right. So 1990 in Chile.
They're ahead or behind?
Oh, way ahead. You want tomorrow's news? It's already done. Anyway, so I'd been to California in 89 and worked for a little winery called Carneros Creek, went back to Chile, and then I was on my way to Europe, and I wanted to meet Zalma Long. I had an opportunity to come and meet the master of wines of California. She was the first Mondavi winemaker. It's not a Mondavi. She was the first winemaker to do barrel fermented Chardonnay in the US, and lo and behold, 3 months later, Paul Hobbs left Simi, and I got the job. I was 26, and unbelievable. And by 28, because Simi at the time was owned by Louis Vuitton, and they put me as head winemaker, or the first winemaker for Terrazas in Argentina. But I also got to go to Cloudy Bay in New Zealand, Cape Mental in Australia, Ruffino in Italy, and Terrazas and Roses in Portugal. And we were owned by LVMH until 1999. I stayed at Simi during the transition to Constellation. I stayed there for 3 years, and after leaving, I decided to leave Constellation in 2003 and went to the world's largest wine company, Allied Domecq. So brands like Clos du Bois, William Hill, Atlas Peak, Gary Farrell, Mumm, Buena Vista, Campo Viejo, Marcos de Renzo, Icios Tarsos.
Yeah, Buena Vista at one point. Yeah. And
Buena Vista, and so we had about 60 wineries in 7 countries, and I looked after about 30 of them. So again, LVMH had started me getting me into the travel business, and Allied Domecq, and then lo and behold, Jim Beam continued that. And so when I left the corporate world in 2008, that's basically what I continue to do. So today I still consult for 26 wineries in 6 countries, and make wine here in Dry Creek, Alexander Valley, and of course Oakville and Napa.
It's a very interesting story that comes into this play here about Jim Beam. So 20 years ago, actually a little bit more than 20 years ago, I was writing for the San Francisco Chronicle, and I also wrote about, besides wine and beer and things like that, I wrote about spirits. So I got to go visit Booker Noe at his house in Kentucky at Jim Beam, and he was super nervous because we were having, the dinner had wine, and he didn't know what to say about it. And Geyser Peak was there, and the brand. So I stood up, and I made him feel comfortable. I talked on behalf of Booker Noe that evening at his house. Oh, it was great. When we came in the door, this is a very fun story. We were offered this kind of very clear one, and it's like called White Dog. And you ever hear that term in Kentucky, that means you're drinking bourbon, but without the barrel coloring on it yet. So it's in its primal stage. And so that's what we were greeted with, was some White Dog. And I'll never forget another one thing, and this is a great thing. This guy was talking to him way too much when he was trying to watch basketball in his rumpus room afterwards, and we were just sitting there having a fun time. And the guy was talking way too much to him, and he just looked at him, and this is something you guys can all use this term sometime, and he just looked at the guy and he said, "Son, I'm out to pasture." And that's it. That's it. He shut up and we moved on. So you can use that line.
Yeah, no,
there you go.
I'll try not to use it on you.
So here we are. You know, you've moved, you've done so much around the world, but I mean, this is your kind of heart and soul. This has got your, your Goldschmidt Vineyards, and here we are drinking your fabulous, the Singing Tree Chardonnay. Why is it called Singing Tree?
Well, that's the tree outside actually, and in November, December, all the birds hang out here and they squawk like crazy. Instead of calling the squawking tree, we decided to call the singing tree. But they fly in ribbons around here. You've seen them if you live in Sonoma County. You'll have seen a lot of ribbons. And I chose this wine to show you because another historical grower, Warren Dutton, who obviously many people know, and unfortunately he passed away, and he has two sons, Steve and Joe, and I've continued the tradition and have made this wine just from their vineyard. We only make 200 cases of it. It's called Singing Tree. So this is the Singing Tree Reserve. The regular Singing Tree is from Russian River, actually from the middle of the Green Valley area. And this vineyard is very close to it, probably about 5 minutes away on Poplar Ave, which is just near Creighton. And I've been making wine from this vineyard for about 32 years now.
Amazing.
And the vineyard has never been replanted. So it's the same original. It's no clones. You know, I'm not a big believer in Chardonnay clone. This is an old Marsal or mass selection, field selection. And it was selected for its subtropical character. It's called the SEE selection, which is a little bit more tropical than Wenti, but it's in that vein.
It's actually from the C family. I believe it's from Yountville, where they took those cuttings, and it's from the C's Candy family, SEE. You guys. So now you know another little trivial point there.
So we make two Chardonnays. This is more of a Montrachet style, and then we make a Chablis style called Fog's Edge. But I chose the Montrachet style because everyone talks about Chablis, and then they drink it and they go, "Oh, I prefer the Montrachet." Because as winemakers, we prefer the steeliness and the graphite and the mineral and the tension that we get in a wine like Fog's Edge. But then when I talk about it, Chablis sounds cool, but you know, it's got less oak, it's got more acidity, more brightness. And then they drink this with a little bit more richness, and it's not fully oaky and malolactic like traditional Chardonnay, but it has that fine grain, almost fine grain tannin that you get in Montrachet.
No, it's beautiful. It's a wonderful, wonderful wine. Lots of that kind of lemon and definitely that pear kind of component to it that's like so wonderful, and it dances in your mouth and sings like a tree.
It's like a Ferris wheel. Somebody said to me the other day, it's like a Ferris wheel in your mouth.
I like that. You know, you're very well known for your Cabernet Sauvignon. I mean, this is, you know, Simi is definitely a big deal for that, and they were for Chardonnay too, and they still are. I mean, the brand is still around, but you know, you've gotten the chance to really get you've learned a lot about Cabernet grown in California, especially here in Sonoma County. What have you? I mean, you're a big Alexander Valley fan, which is right behind us here. We're in Dry Creek, where they do grow Cabernet, but you're an Alexander Valley man, aren't you?
This is funny because the wine you're pouring is an Oakville.
It's an Oakville one, of course, because it's Napa.
Well,
you know.
No, because
we've got the other one though. Don't worry, we're gonna go Alexander Valley.
We got the Alex. If you're worthy, it's coming up.
Yeah.
But no, it's I chose because Napa, you know, is a big, you know, a lot of different appellations. But I chose Oakville. I mean, Rutherford may be more famous, you know, with wineries like Camus, etc. But I chose Oakville because it's more similar to me to Alexander Valley because the tannins are a little bit more fine grain. But the difference between Oakville and Alexander Valley, I make these two wines exactly the same. The only difference is they're picked on different days and they come from a different vineyard, but they're aged the same, they're bottled on the same day, they're on the same amount of time on skins, I treat them the same, and I do this deliberately so that when I go into the market or I'm talking to the trade, I can show, well, here's two wines that are made exactly the same, and the only difference is, of course, where they're from. So This vineyard is Mid-Valley Oakville. It's the only little knoll in Oakville. Right across the street from Harlan.
Okay.
So there's Harlan, Plumpjack, and Groth are right across the street, and we're right next to Silver Oak, and behind us is Screaming Eagle and Tench. So really unique, and sorry, Rudd, not to leave something out.
Love Rudd.
But beautiful location, just and the tannins are much more silky, I think, than Rutherford. Rutherford tannins are a little bit more grainy. Oakville tannins are a little bit more structured. Sure. But we always pick Oakville usually about 5 to 10 days ahead of the Alexander Valley because it's warmer over there, of course. What other differences? We have more water over there. Alexander Valley is a bit drier. It's
your production though is so small. I mean, listen, you guys. If you guys know Silver Oak, that's where they started, is Oakville. They have a huge property here in Alexander Valley too. So you've got the two things. Like, how many cases do they produce? In some cases, 100,000 cases from the same vintage. How many cases of this do you produce?
500.
500. Okay, so see the difference here? Yeah, this is a little customized one. This is a signature. This is Nick Goldschmidt's signature stuff, you guys.
Well, it's just my wife and I and our own team, you know. So we don't have any partners, and we're a real sort of farm to gate sort of company, and we make a lot of other different wines too. And the reason we do that is because a lot of my friends who are growers for large companies got laid off at various times, and so we create other wines to be single vineyard with those names of the families and the wines. But the Yoeman and the Game Ranch, so we're drinking the Game Ranch from Oakville right now. This is just us, just one of the first wines we made, and first vintage of this was 1998. So believe it or not, I was still working in the corporate world at the time, and I was secretly making this wine. But really unique site, and the name Game Ranch is really interesting because right here we're in Dry Creek, and if we go to the end of the Dry Creek, that's the fish hatchery for Sonoma County.
That's correct.
But Game Ranch is actually the fish hatchery in Napa Valley.
That's correct. And this is really this is right on the border of Yountville too. I mean, it's very, very, I mean, it's like you can throw a rock and you're in Yountville. I mean, it's easy. So it's really there on that south kind of eastern edge of Yountville, right? Of Oakville. So it's a very great spot because it's, yes, it gets the heat, but it also gets a little bit more of that breeze that comes in from the bay in the late afternoons. And that's why, I mean, this is a delicate wine in some ways, but it fills the mouth with flavor. And it's got some nice spicy notes on it too. I mean, it tastes like Cabernet, you guys. It's fantastic.
Yeah, well, you're exactly right. If you don't like spice, drink Merlot.
And this actually is I know this vineyard quite well for, our good friend Bill at Goose Cross, another New Zealander. He knows his stuff there, and he gets some from this vineyard too. There's some big rocks in that vineyard, so you can it's got that little bit of minerality to it, and I think it's a very special spot there.
Yeah, no, it's the other thing I chose it for is because it's east facing, so it only gets the morning sun. We don't get the afternoon heat,
right?
Like you would on sort of Howell Mountain, Atlas Peak, a burning west face. East face, similar to this, would be like Spring Mountain, Mount Vito.
Yeah.
So you're going to get a little bit more silkiness, but the other difference between Alexander Valley and Oakville is that obviously you're going to get a little bit more black fruit here. So if you think of red fruit and black fruit, high end would be raspberry and strawberry, and down here would be black currant. Well, I think this wine sort of starts blueberry, black cherry, plum. Whereas Alexander Valley, which we'll try next, will be blueberry, red cherry, a little bit of strawberry. So the other difference is the Alexander Valley is going to have a little bit more acidity, and the Napa Valley is going to have a bit more sweetness because it usually has higher alcohol in the Napa Valley.
Listen to this guy. I mean, listen to him, you guys. I mean, I hope you're learning some things here. This is like very important information. Why do you think I got so smart? Because I know this guy.
How many shows have you done? Like 300?
No, over. We're getting 150 just since the pandemic started.
150 times the 30 years we've known each other. I think I would score the highest.
I think so.
I mean, the math works that way, right?
Actually, I told him, dude, we cannot talk for 2 hours on the show today, but we will. I mean, we talk all the time. We have the funnest time together. I love hanging out with this man. I love tasting his wine. So let's go into the Alexander Valley now. This is a great one right here. This is a Yoeman vineyard designate that you have, and I'm going to take this up to the camera so everyone can see this a little bit better, and the differences between these two labels. Tell us a little bit about this vineyard.
So we own this vineyard. The block is called Yoeman, and the vineyard is called Staircase. So this vineyard, I've been growing grapes from here for, again, about 30 years.
Here's the Oakville.
That's the game ranch.
Yeah, game ranch.
So about 30 years I've been making wine from the Yoeman block. And then we were lucky enough to purchase the vineyard about 6-7 years ago. And it's just north of Guysville, north of the old Coppola facility, and deep in this. It's like back in this really weird valley. It'd be, unless somebody took you there, you wouldn't be able to find it. But
no deliverance songs playing.
No. And Yoeman, well, the funny thing is, my wife and I have two different commentaries. So I think Yoeman means sort of vagabond, unemployed, as I was, roaming around South America and Europe, back in the 80s. With no money and a backpack. And then Yolan goes, no. Yoeman means yeoman of the guard, like in the palace and all that. Okay. Yeoman of the guard, protector of the vineyard, protector of the gate. So you can choose either way which way you want to use yeoman. But this vineyard is incredibly unique because it's all schist. So it's all compressed granite. And if you there's plenty of photos of me showing the roots going down about 1.5 meters, 2 meters through this rock. And then finally we get to the clay. So these vines, this is what Great Bordeaux is all about. I don't want to get into it today, Chris, but I'm not a big believer in the word terroir, unless it's dry farmed and organic or regenerative farming, which is what we do. And so just really unique. And what's cool is because you just had the Game Ranch being a little bit more black fruit. I said Alexander Valley is a little bit more red fruit, but this vineyard is blacker, because it's got so much richness and intensity. We only produce about 2 ton an acre on this, so it's tiny yield, and the berries, like a normal Cadbury weighs about 0.95 grams, this one weighs about 0.8, so the skin to pulp ratio is much higher. We crush the grapes and it's already this color. It's
funny,
amazing.
You say that, and I think about how I would have done this too. I mean, we'll use the comparison once again to Silver Oak. Most people go, oh, Silver Oak, Napa Valley, or Oakville and everything. But if you have their Alexander Valley next to it, you're going to taste that last, because it's got more flavor, and it's like, wow, you really feel like you know this spot. And it's kind of fun, Daryl Groom, our great friend Daryl Groom, Groomy as we call him, he and I flew back. I didn't know he was on the same plane as me, and I sit down and there's Lisa, his wife, and him right behind me in the plane. I'm like, oh, this is awesome.
Oh, you were flying in first class?
Daryl's always first class. But we got to fly into Santa Rosa Airport, and it's so beautiful to look at Alexander Valley from the air. It's just an amazing place, and you don't realize how great it is, because you just drive by and go, ooh, it's a big space, but there really aren't that many wineries there. It's really about just the vineyards and the spacing and how they kind of dip like this and they move like that, and the soils are so wonderful, and there's a reason that it's covered with vineyards now, because these guys are so smart. They got these properties while they still could, and it's
too expensive now.
It's too expensive, but it is a very, very special place. I mean, I'm lucky to have grown up here in Sonoma County. I'm lucky to have had this man come to Sonoma County, but it's a very special place, especially when it comes to Cabernet in America. It is really great, and that's why tasting these two side by side is so interesting, and it's always fascinating for you, isn't it?
Well, that was good that we showed you Russian River, which is, for me, it's not many Russian rivers out there. A lot of people have gone Sonoma Coast because it's a bigger appellation. Russian River is a much tighter appellation.
It's true.
Show you Alexander Valley, obviously to the north. We're sitting here in Dry Creek, which we can go and talk about once we finish up. And then, of course, my favorite appellation in Napa being Oakville. So I thought it was a good lineup of 3 wines to show you. And I think they're all really, really different. And because of the history for me, I always joke that when Kim Jong-un drops a nuclear bomb and we all run to the bunker, which wine are you going to choose, man? Because you're going to be down there for 15 years. So I would choose a wine from a winemaker that's been in the area for 30 years. Because if I'm down there for 15 years, I want to know that wine's going to last for 15 years. And I'll be making wine from all of these vineyards for more than 15 years.
The advice you're getting in this show today is so valuable to all of you. No, I mean, that's
it's all
why
free, man. It's all free.
I love hamming it up with this guy. He's one of my dear friends, and it's great having you guys with us today. And I mean, how many wines overall do you make under the Goldschmidt label?
Well, we make the Goldschmidt wines, of which there are 4.
Yeah.
We make 2 Singing Trees, Fidelity, which is my international brand, so we make out of New Zealand, Australia, Argentina, and California, and Fidelity, which is the only wine I make that's a brand.
Do you still do the Forefathers?
Yeah, Forefathers Cab, Forefathers Sauvignon Blanc, and then out of Australia we do the Shiraz.
And I will say this, I mean, this guy is a New Zealander, and one of the things is, and believe me, Daryl and Mick Schroeder and all of that, those are the Aussies. And
that's why I got my degree in Australia. You know, the New Zealanders moving to Australia increased the IQ of both countries. So that's why it was so easy to get a degree there. That's why I went.
Of course he's going to say that. Of course. But I mean, the thing about it is having this guy who's got such rich knowledge and everything, we're so lucky to get him from New Zealand. I mean, he's not here that often, but when he is, you got to love this man, and you got to love everything that he stands for and how he represents Sonoma County. We just did an amazing wine competition, the Press Democrat annual North Coast Wine Challenge. You and I judged that together
many times.
Many times.
11
Since 11 years straight that we've judged it since it began. We have great pictures together. We always will. But it's just a great thing to always hang out with you. And it's great to be here at your house and to share these moments with you guys. I hope you guys learned a lot about not only this man and how crazy good these wines are, but also a little bit about Simi and these kinds of things about the differences between Napa and Sonoma. They are different, and that's the wonderful thing. Napa is wonderful. Sonoma is wonderful. We live right next to both of them. They're right next to each other, and this is American wine in many forms, especially when it comes to Cabernet Sauvignon. These are 2 amazing examples, and this is a great example, especially for what we do here in Sonoma County with Chardonnay. And I just bring all this up because, and New Zealand up, because I will not let him talk about Sauvignon Blanc today. And that's a whole different show. And when he's back next year, or maybe later this year, we will talk about Sauvignon Blanc. But he will blow your mind with his knowledge of Sauvignon Blanc and all of his philosophies of this. But we cannot do that today. But we thank you for joining us. So cheers to all of you guys, and cheers to Nick Goldschmidt.
Cheers, Chris. Thank you for coming.
You got it.